Thank you all for joining us tonight. This is Let's Talk from Brownfield to Greenspace at Berkley Riverfront. And I'm going to turn it over to Eric Rogers, our Executive Director at BIPOC KC.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you everybody for joining us. Port KC is our presenting sponsor for Tour de Bier KC 2021. So I'm going to say a big thanks to everybody who has stuck with us the last couple of years, turning this into a virtual event, and hope that you are going to have a lot of fun whenever you choose to bike your own adventure this month on Tour de Bier, starting and ending at the riverfront and the beautiful Barquet right there on the river. Really excited to have Jon Stephens here today with us. He's the CEO and president of Port KC, and he'll tell us what that means here in a minute. But we're really glad to have Jon here because the riverfront is a crucial part of Kansas City. It's really become an iconic place for us together. And with the Riverfront Heritage Trail, it's an important part and nexus of the burgeoning Kansas City Metro Green Trail Network. And so we're really excited to hear more about the riverfront's place in that system. And Jon personally has been a big supporter and champion of all things walking and biking and transit in Kansas City for many years. So we're excited to have him here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jon. He's got a little bit of a presentation, and then if you have questions along the way, please add them to the chat box, and we'll try to answer as many of those as we can at the end. And then we'll also send follow-ups tomorrow with additional questions and answers that we couldn't get to tonight. So Jon, take it away. Tell us, what would you say you do?
Yeah, well, glad to be here. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Liz, and welcome to all of you. I'm looking forward to clicking through a few slides with very few words on them, but talking a little bit about what Port does and more importantly, how it intersects with where we are today and where we're going on the riverfront, which has taken many, many years and many great leaders committed to getting the funding and the political will to get us to where we are. So I am going to share my screen and put this presentation up real quick. If everyone can bear with me for 1 second, I'll do full screen mode. All right, if everyone has that, I will click through, and this can be very interactive. No worries about interrupting or dropping things in chat. But Port KC, we do have a port authority in Kansas City. It's one of 14 port authorities in the state of Missouri. We are arguably the most complete, and that's so slight to our friends around the state. That's the fact that we have built out a very strong team of legal, economic, finance, and we've had the ability over the last 20 plus years to build that. So we do focus not just on the riverfront in Berkley Park, but on a much larger area of Kansas City, Missouri. The city limits of Kansas City is how we operate. And through capital reinvestments, we put 100% of our dollars back into the community through these projects. We do not receive any money from the KCMO General Fund. All of our revenues come from lease, project, and federal and state grants. So I know we're here to talk about the riverfront, but I want to highlight a little bit of that. And the fact that the center there is Berkley Riverfront and the development, but just slightly to the west, actually right on the state line as the Missouri River makes its turn to go fully east-west into Missouri, is the Woods Weather Port Terminal. And that's actually an active bulk goods terminal. You see the photo at the top. It has almost doubled, other than during the last year of COVID, over the last 5 years of reclaiming and bringing back a general bulk goods terminal. We've been able to double the tonnage to go well over 100,000 tons transited in that terminal in the West Bottoms. And we continue to be on pace to hit 200,000 tons. And a funny piece of trivia is the Missouri River, the lower Missouri, through Kansas City to St. Louis, has now been designated as a national maritime highway for the first time. So it is now M29 as a maritime highway. And we do run goods there. And I was on a waterways panel, and we do discuss the balance, the three-legged stool of ecology of the river, the economics of the river, and the development, use of development and the attractiveness of the river for sport and recreation and development. I will jump back. 49 Crossing, many of you know that as Richards-Gebaur, the decommissioned Brack Air Force Base. So we redeveloped that. And then at the confluence of the Blue River, we actually have a 420-acre development called the Missouri River Terminal, which you can see the third rendering. That will actually be a intermodal center, rail, trucking, and containers on vessel coming from the Gulf of Mexico and international markets to and from international markets of actually containers on vessel that we have relationships with global shippers and with Port of Plaquemines. So we have a lot of great partners. Most of you are affiliated with many of our partners. I like to say that it takes all of our partners to make a lot of these projects go. And we're lucky enough that we're able to work with many of them. So let's talk a little bit about placemaking, where we are between the ASB Bridge and the Bond Bridge for the core redevelopment area. And then further west, we have the nature trail to the Town of Kansas Bridge, and further west all the way to state line. So a little bit of the history, and I'm going to start well before 1855, because I think it's important that when we talk about placemaking at Berkley Riverfront, it doesn't start with Lewis and Clark. It doesn't start with our founding fathers arriving here. It actually starts with the indigenous peoples of this region. And, that starts with the Hopewells, 300 AD. And they settled, original settlers of this land. And then we had so many movements of peoples, because this is a desirable place. It's a place that people wanted to settle from the moment humanity first arrived here, at the confluence of rivers, at the bend of rivers, with high overlooks. Up through 1290, we had the Mississippi tribe, obviously important settlers in the area all the way through the region. And then many of the names of the indigenous peoples percolate through everything from state names to river names to town names of the Kanza, the Osage, the Otos, the Missouri. And then the one that's most well-known, probably in more recent times, was the Wyandot tribe of KCK and through this region. And they moved into and settled the river bottoms as well as they moved. But that was later. That was 1840s when they were moved out of Ohio and resettled to this area. So the indigenous peoples of the Kansas City region settled, moved here, but then also were relocated here through forced relocation. But all of those peoples have involvement in the community still, a lot of heritage in the community. And I'll say, I mentioned Missouri River Terminal and the Blue River Corridor, which is not what we're here to talk about today, but in relationships to this, I will say we are actually working as part of our MIRAD grant and the development of the confluence. We are working with the Osage tribe to do a study of are there any remaining artifacts, any remaining components of settlement that of archaeologic importance and of tribal importance that could be found in the area that was formerly the AK Steel site. We don't hold out a lot of hope that an area that has been a steel mill and remediated has a lot, but there are some areas along the far eastern area of the shore that we hold out some hope that there might be some archaeological foundations of tribal settlements there. And if there are, we look forward to working with them on the Greenspace. So this riverfront has been active at the base of what is the Missouri of the Main Street, was dug out up the cliffs into our downtown from 1855. This is a view looking from what is now Harlem in North Kansas, in the north of the river, south to the area. Then, unfortunately, industrial development came in. I wouldn't say, I guess not totally unfortunately, because with development and rail and industry came the modern city of Kansas City. But we had some very unfortunate things happen on the riverfront, which hindered really development as a green space. It became a raw industrial. This is the Gas, Light, and Coke Company. There was coal gasification plants. Yes, that's an actual thing that happened in Kansas City as we tried to power industry up the hill and throughout the West Bottoms. And you will see a little bit of the remnants there of Vicinity, which some of you might recognize as Veolia, that is actually still operating. And they actually operate a very important steam loop through many of the buildings of downtown. And they run a pump house that you can see as you come under the ASB bridge. You will see an active pump house there that pumps the water to produce this, be used for steam, and then returns the water into the river. So here's a little bit of the industry, and the Veolia plant is that large brick building with the towers, the smokestacks coming out. But throughout really all of the development of Kansas City, the river was used for import and export of goods. This was used a lot for coal. Coal was brought in, coal was left here, coal was transported here. And then a lot of the basis of goods for the construction of the city, concrete and mill scale and other goods. So that's exciting. That was important through the 20s, 30s. As you can see, you see the ASB Bridge, and you see what is now Berkley Riverfront as a floodplain through a lot of history before the levees were built. So I'm going to skip over this. We don't need to talk about this, but I will talk about how we got to connecting the riverfront. $40+ million was invested thanks to many folks, including now Congressperson Cleaver and many others, of federal grants to remediate and connect the riverfront. And I'm going to get to the challenges we still have with connecting the riverfront. But one of those was an incredible movement in 2004 to build the Town of Kansas Bridge and really connect over the rail for pedestrians and users of the riverfront with the Heritage Trail. Then the second was 2010, and that's the ASB Underpass. So you can see the old coal or the old concrete and roadway drops of settlement and debris. And the ASB Bridge, while it's still an active rail bridge, is also an architectural and engineering wonder. And so in 2010, the ability to connect the underpass really opened this up as to make this a real bike and runner friendly and pedestrian friendly trail that we see today. Then we looked at the parkland, and as the parkland was remediated, it was also, thanks to some very smart thinkers, it was also backfilled so that actually all of Berkley Park is now above the levee wall. So the levee wall is really built, it's built, the trail is built up basically almost on the levee wall and above the levee wall. So that gave the confidence to not really worry about flooding as it is thought about in most other areas as you look at riverfront development. So that allowed a lot of thinking of then how do we activate the riverfront? There was a lot of thinking of master planned, large scale, master planned, development. And over time, there were many plans put into place. But what you will see and what I'll get to is a little bit more about the incremental development that we're seeing today and our approach today. But with that comes a little bit of fun. And the volleyball courts were an investment in activating the park, because I think many of you know and hopefully share my belief that Kansas City as an urban community in Kansas City, Missouri, we don't lack for green space, but we lack for quality activated green space and connected green space to our communities. And so having a volleyball court that's programmed with our friends at Rec Spaces. And then we added just over almost 3 years ago now, a open fitness CrossFit court, and we're adding more to that you will see to activate the Park East side of the park. So you can see that here. And then we continue to reinvest in the idea of a west to east connector. And the idea is you come off of the trail under the ASB overpass or underpass, come into the area, you'll see Bar K, that's accessible to the green space, to the burgeoning green space, and the core apartments, that's 353 new apartments that will be open next year in an area that had quite a bit of peering and rubble in the debris under this area. Clean, but a lot of engineering challenges on this area along the rail line. So we look to do slightly less density there, but a proposed project that we're working on 12A, which is right up against the bike ped bridge and the coming streetcar. This is anticipated to be 8+ stories of density. And the roadway that is a private circulator roadway within parcel 12, even though that's designed as part of the core apartment development, it's designed in a complete street manner to be a on-street parkable roadway that takes people into Bar K, so that you don't just have driveways and interfaces there. Additionally, you'll see a little bit of a typo here, but parcel 3A, 3B, 3C, all of these gray boxes are active development sites. So as we look at this, the riverfront will not all be multifamily, but it will be mixed use. And we are breaking these parcels, which are about the size, originally designed as about the size of downtown city blocks. But we are taking the approach, the incremental design approach of breaking these and leasing and selling these to developers in an approach where there will be sub parcels within each of these. So I think, generally speaking, in parcels 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, and 13, you will see incremental design approach where there'll be iterative development with master planned from a density standpoint, from a parking standpoint, but you will not see a future of large scale monolithic developments. We needed, I think, the Union with 410 apartments to be the first development down here. And I will say this was the first new residential development on the riverfront in Kansas City, Missouri in 120 years. So we needed to get us to plant our flag that this is a viable development. Now we will see a true walkable mixed use development as we go forward. And I will also say, in defense of the Union, well, it's a large single phase development. It does have a lot of walkable and accessible and street face components around it. And I think you will see that with core, particularly with the secondary building along Berkley Parkway. So along those lines, this is some development of core apartments. As it comes on, you'll see the roadway that's already being used by their contractors as it comes up. Probably a good time to mention that stormwater that you will not see when I joined, the development had set-asides of 3 different areas that were set aside for stormwater detention retention along the rail. And we eliminated those. And we now require all of the developments to have large underground coffered stormwater detention collectors under their buildings. So there are several million gallons of stormwater detention under each of the buildings in the core. And all future projects, or almost all future projects, will have large underground coffered stormwater collectors as opposed to having above grade areas for stormwater collection. So where are we headed now? And I'm excited to say that with our partners at Ride KC and our partners at the Streetcar Authority, early next year, you will see the bike ped bridge. We did get completed the funding out for the bike ped bridge. So that will move forward. And we thank everyone on this call. I know several of you were very loud and vocal advocates for that. And I can tell you, as someone who bikes and runs the Grand Viaduct, it is a terrifying experience. And I really don't want to see anyone else on that roadway ever again once we ribbon cut the bike ped bridge. So that's also bringing about the streetcar extension. And that is timed to correspond with the south extension. And it will cross over and land just past, right at the western edge of the Union. And we have already funded, and HDR is conducting a Park East stop study. So we are already getting the 30% design planning to do a second stop. And our goal is that, and many of you have asked on social media, and many people have said this in discussions of how will this go? Will it run on the street? Will it run where? How will this interface? Our desire right now, and what we're looking at, is having the stop be off of the roadway in the park, right on the edge of the park, and then to run it along the curvilinear southern face of the park on the edge of the green space. So it'll be a very European style streetcar extension. And then there will be a Park East stop. And we have already looked and working with MoDOT on how we could connect a future stop under the Bond Bridge, wrapping under the Bond Bridge and coming around into the Bally's Casino. Probably a good time to mention Bally's Casino. They are well underway on their $40 million makeover, which will completely reshape the casino. It also will add 40,000 square feet of retail and restaurant. And they have agreed they will be greening all of their space. It has preservation and land use for a future hotel. It has land use for trail extensions through and around the facility. And so we're very excited about that. Additionally, I mentioned the volleyball courts. With KC Crew and Luke Wade and the team, we have a plan in place to work with them to build an amenity in the park that will be a restaurant, bar, beer garden, activated space that will also, for the first time, have accessible bathrooms in the park as part of a rooftop beer garden, restaurant, sports facility. So we're excited about that public-private partnership activation with what is called Rec Hall and Rec Spaces. All right, these are brand new, but we have looked at Berkley Parkway, and I can say it is outside of my window, and I absolutely despise that road. I don't know how many of you love the road. I do know that semis that like to go more than 50 miles an hour love the road right outside of my office. But thanks to a lot of partners, we are working with the city, and we funded hiring design and engineering planning of what options could be done to reduce Berkley Parkway to one lane each direction of vehicular traffic. And I'm happy to say we have some early design concepts. And one of the main focuses is pedestrian crossings, particularly at the area that leads to Barquet and to the core. Keep in mind, by next year, there will be more than 1,100 citizens living at that intersection. And so the idea of slowing traffic is incredibly important for us. So from an advocacy standpoint, we will be advocating and seeking support. We are hoping to fund a large chunk of it ourselves as Port KC, but it certainly, I think, is worthy of city support and grant support to go from Lydia all the way down and mitigate traffic and add on-street parking, which parking will be a needed factor down here as we look to add development. So I'm going to go back and stay here for a second. That as we look at this development, you'll see on this confluence rendering height going up. So that's a key point, that we are looking every subsequent development that we build. One of our core design standards with our land use architects and our team is that every building must be of equal to higher quality, of equal to higher activation with street level activation, and more dense in verticality and development quality than the last. We are also moving forward with projects with not designing them, and this is a big thing that we are overcoming, of not designing them with parking garages as a right and as a private use parking garage. We are looking at writing into the development agreements that they will park in temporary future development land parking. This is similar to the Gulch and even the Rose District and others, Portland, Nashville, and others, really kicking the can down the road for car parking in a sense. And I mean that in the best sense of the word. So instead of designing everything based on, well, where is everybody going to park? We're looking at what is the minimum needed parking for that development and giving them temporary access to surface parking with the idea that they will then contribute to shared parking as it's needed from multiple developments. So big change in mindset at the city, big change in the mindset of a lot of planners, but it's something that I think is needed here. If you come down here on a regular basis, you will see all of the development parcels. So the land to the south of the park, we have been leveling and grading that and just adding gravel and utilizing that for event parking. That will be the land that is utilized for development parking as development generally moves west to east. So another fun one that we've undertaken, and I think it's important for thinking through the history, heritage, and activation, is the Riverfront Heritage Trail. And you'll see the Town of Kansas Bridge here. There are two large concrete structures that are wharfs. Those are former wharf structures that were used for shipping, transit of goods. We actually are in the middle of Trans-Systems giving us a stability, an engineering stability assessment. If those come back like we hope, and they are structurally sound for use, we will be hopefully moving the railings to the edges of those and removing the do not enter 6-foot chain links that are around them currently, and opening those up for public access. And so we are definitely have no definite plans, but I will tell you, this is sort of my philosophy sometimes, is great ideas come from great spaces. And we don't know how we will activate these, but finding that they're structurally sound gives us the ability to open those up for people to get a better view of the river, get a better view of what it was like to look down onto barges. And we want to do that. And then we think that arts, entertainment, food trucks, all of the activation will come and ideas will be brought to us as we are able to activate that. The same, we're doing the same with some great partners in the river market under the Town of Kansas Bridge, of how can we clear and activate a little bit of green space and access under the Town of Kansas Bridge for activation for the neighborhood, for the river market neighborhood. So we're undergoing that, and they received some funding for a study of that, and we're looking at doing that. All right, I want to touch really quick on a couple really important ones. I touched a little bit on this the red line to the east. If we are able, which we are by right, to go around and effectively get cyclists and runners and explorers easily and safely around Bally's casino facility. We have a little challenge with the Evergy plant right to the east of Bally, but we believe that thanks to the city and thanks to Jason and others, that there is a plan and a great plan to move a trail interface around the Evergy plant. And I am a huge advocate, and many of you on this call probably are better versed than I am. But as someone who bikes the levee in the park, in the Riverfront Park, all the way around the bend, getting the Berkley Park and getting the trail around Evergy gives us access to the levee. And the levee wall along the KCMO Parks land takes you generally all the way to the Blue River corridor. And that is an incredible opening of trail access and in keeping with, I think, all of our plans of what we want. So we are huge advocates of that. And with being landowners, large landowners in the Blue River corridor, investors in the Blue River corridor, we think there's great ways to look at the western shore of the Blue River and connect this trail in. And then, you know, from there, all things are possible as you connect in to the trails and even all the way to the Katy and everywhere else through the Jackson County trails. On the west side, I will be honest, it was the best that we could do and that predecessors could do, but having the trail go up the Town of Kansas Bridge, on surface streets through the River Market, back down and around Beardsley and elsewhere, and then back down to the West Bottoms isn't ideal. It's a great option, but we are working with the city right now. We were able to get land transfer of all of the west side of the levee, about 90% of the way to the Heritage Trail in the Town of Kansas Bridge. So we're working with the city on the last piece of that stretch. And my guess is many of you have, quote, illegally ridden the wet side of the levee wall. Yep. And our goal there is to get full Port KC possession of that. And initially, we will probably look at removing the barrier, doing better crushed gravel, and opening that up with signage initially as phase one. We may have to, since that goes straight into the active port, we may have to do a fence turnaround with just some information there. But our goal there is then to explore how we can bifurcate rail and active port facility and get people through the levee, through or over the levee wall and into the rest of the Riverfront Heritage Trail. And I think once we connect that, it's intuitive that we stay all at grade, and you'll be able to stay at grade and go all the way into the Heritage Trail and then all the way into KCK. So we're very excited about that. We are committed. I am personally committed to that. I believe in it. And I've actually even argued a little bit with my own team here about why would you do that? And I personally think it's the right thing. So from an advocacy standpoint, we want to find solutions there to get people safely through or over the rail and the levee wall at Woodsweather. But we're excited about that opportunity. Another one, we were not funded this past year, but we did apply for neighborhood funds because Lydia and going across the rail at Lydia is one for our Columbus Park friends. I think Industrial Traffic Way and Lydia is one that needs some attention from a pedestrian and bike standpoint. So we're committed to that. We continue to work with city stakeholders on how Northeast Industrial Traffic Way can better connect and loop through the riverfront. Because connectivity, as you see here, connectivity has always been an issue. And you will notice we have two rails here. Then we have this large amount of land that cannot be developed. And then we have another rail line. And so if Secretary Buttigieg were here and I said, and he gave me a blank check, one of the things that we would do is we would convince the rail lines to move this line to run adjacent to the other rail lines, and that would open up 13 more acres of development. It would also allow us to leapfrog and reconnect the street grid from Columbus Park into the riverfront. Connectivity is still our biggest challenge. We're doing our best to reconnect, and I think we're having a lot of success with that. But that's still one of our challenges. And honestly, one of the questions advanced questions from guests were, what held us back? Connectivity to the riverfront held us back for decades. So I talked a little bit about where do we go with the riverfront. This is the Navy Yard. These are other areas that I think particularly, I personally look to this mid-rise style of the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., and having the intermediary cut-throughs of blocks, having inter-access parking, having access to green space. This is the type of development we aspire to as we talk to developers, and developers come to us and propose projects. So you will see more projects like this if we're successful, and if developers and the community believes in us. This is the type of project I think you will see developing our riverfront. Based on this sort of density, at full build out, the riverfront could support about 5.5 million square feet of development. And our goal is to have that be walkable, diverse community. I think it also goes without mentioning, it was in the Business Journal Friday, but we have been committed. We've pursued 4 projects and are now pursuing a 5th of LIHTC funding for low-income housing tax credits and more affordable housing to have mixed income. The core project is one of the first projects to come out of the ground across the board that will have guaranteed income restricted unit set-asides. But we are happy in a parcel along Lydia. We're partnering with the Vicino Group, and they're looking at 60, they're proposing 60 units that will not just be affordable, but will also have wraparound services for chronically unhoused citizens, and moving people into very wraparound service type project. Our other projects going forward will have significant income restricted set-asides as well. So let's see here. I'm going to get to questions, but I'm going to go through some of these. Milwaukee, Nashville, Austin. There is nothing keeping us from that today. There is absolutely nothing. It is all about the fact that for 50 years, really post-war, people turned their back on the riverfront in Kansas City, and really throughout a lot of the Midwest. And the investment's been made. We just now need believers. For many years, developers looked at the riverfront and one after the other thought about it and never invested. And it took, again, as a lifelong Kansas Citian, I feel like I have the street cred to say this, but it took an Indianapolis developer to actually open up their checkbook and be the first to say, we're investing in the riverfront with the Union Apartments. And now we need more and we need better. And I think we have a great advocate in Brian Platt, our city manager. He has been very outspoken, and we have almost weekly discussions around density of development and quality of development down here. I think I answered the 1880s. I don't know if I got exactly to an 1880, but you got pretty close. It was a pretty vibrant place, but I would say it was pretty darn gritty, would be the best probably environment. Environmental contaminants, luckily those have all been remediated. We are good on environmental contaminants. We actually just did core drilling along the Bond Bridge parcel, the large parcel right along the Bond Bridge. And the worst they found was a little bit of compacted trash from the 1900s that posed no environmental hazards. So we feel very good about that. It is fully environmentally remediated and handled. We do have some challenges still, like I mentioned with parcel 12 near Bar K, of the soil type and getting to piering. And that site would not have been financially viable to build a large tower on. And that's because of the soil type. But we could spread out those piers and do that in a different way. Tracking, great question. So we have installed some, not to sound like Big Brother, I don't want to discourage any of you, but we do with some of our partners, we are starting to track cell phone pings of use of the riverfront and are starting to get a little bit of burgeoning data with some of our partners. And I can tell you that one initial report we received about this time last year was 2019 to 2020, there was a 400% increase in weekly users at Berkley Park. So excited about that. And we're trying to get more data. I'm a big believer in analytics, but casual use and feedback has been that the use is going much, much higher. A couple other things I'll touch on. I could go on and on and on, but it's 6:46, so I won't. But I could go on about programming. I could go on about user types, partners. But I'll say a couple things that we're planning is there will be, and I'm biting my tongue, but we will have some very big announcements, fingers crossed, around November of this year for major users of the park and of the riverfront to come. You've seen a little bit, there has been some discussion around a boutique hotel. I will say that is well in the planning stages for a boutique hotel, rooftop restaurant, etc. And we are partners with the Parade of Hearts. We are committed to murals and art in the riverfront. So 2022, oh my gosh, 2022, you will see significant activation of the riverfront and of Berkley Park as it pertains to arts activation and events activation. We actually just reorged our team, and Mariah Shields, who is on here, in all of her many roles with communications and PR. But we are now sharing that role with Renee Holtgren on our team, who will be managing and activating the riverfront with active management through our CID. We have CID, we have private security, we have private maintenance. We will be adding a capital investment partner. Kim Studios is our architectural design team to integrate everything. And we will be partnering to bring cornerstone events to the park. So in addition to charity events and events for 2022, our goal is to have 4 to 6 cornerstone events in the park, seasonal diverse events to bring more users to the park, food, music, cultural. So with that, I am now going to absolutely shut up and hopefully answer any and all questions from the team or from Eric. But thanks again for letting me ramble at you for 40 minutes or 30 minutes.
Thank you, Jon. That was an amazing presentation. And yeah, you did absolutely answer a lot of the questions that were submitted in advance. So there's a few that have come up along the way that will take a few minutes to throw at you. Okay. We had a question about, are there examples in other cities who have created trails that have threaded some of these challenges with other things going on the riverfront in terms of industry and ports? I'll jump in and say, as much as it pains me to compliment our friends in St. Louis, I think they've done a great job with the North Riverfront Trail on the Mississippi River, which threads through all kinds of factories and industry and port activity, and is, I think, the best example I've seen of how to do that through a lot of active industrial areas. But I'd be curious, Jon, if you know of other examples around the country that Kansas City could look to.
No, I think there's several. One of the questions that I get all over the country when I speak and look at this is I have to explain to people that the Missouri River, particularly at this area, is moving really it's one of the fastest rivers in North America at this juncture. As it turns and narrows, it speeds up. So a counterexample, much closer to home, I would say Des Moines has done a wonderful job with connecting through their downtown. But as you get further into the lakes and the other pieces, as you get into areas, they've done a nice job. Pittsburgh has done a nice job. And then I would say I look to DC a lot. I think DC has done a great job. They have different challenges. They don't have quite the active rail infrastructure. We have one of the most active freight rail lines in the country. But they don't have that, but they had military installations and a whole lot of other things that have put them into having some challenges, and they've been able to overcome a lot of those. I think that with some of the federal funding, we've been very successful with Build Grant, NARAD grants, and others. And I think with our partners, we're really optimistic that we have several shovel-ready projects in our community, not only to connect the riverfront, but really to think more holistically, be it the Green Line, which has been discussed a lot, that would loop down Paseo and down along Union Station and through the crossroads and provide a much needed connector. But also, Metro Blue and looking at trails all the way across the river. There's a lot of examples. I think, we can look to those examples, but we can't replicate those examples. We've got to use our own built environment. I'm really happy. I personally think that leaving, and it was done out of financial necessity, but I think leaving some of the old roadways and the various pieces as you get through the trails provides quite a unique experience for people through the trails. And we continue to add. You will see we'll probably be burning the habitat, doing a natural burn for environmental, and then we'll be adding in more indigenous trees and native species to provide a little more shade in the coming years. So we continue to do that and continue to look to our partners to activate.
Great. We also had a few questions about the levees, and I know there's a big project that's going to happen to raise a lot of levees in the region, especially in the West Bottoms. I'm curious if that's going to involve Berkley Riverfront, and also how do you feel about the current levee height for the riverfront as we experience climate change and the rapid increase of really severe, significant weather events that are unprecedented for our current infrastructure?
Yeah, well, again, not to get into the weeds, for none of you joined for the industrial and river navigation discussion, so that's for a different one. I won't bore you, but I will say, we are one of the primary conduits with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and climate change is absolutely impacting the river. We're in a much better situation than the West right now. But raising those levees and investing in that and continuing to look at the three-legged stool of the river is vital. The river levee project does not impact here. We're actually, the Berkley Park neighborhood is already well above the 500-year floodplain. So even post the Kansas side levees and the others, Berkley Park will still have a pooled flood level higher than those areas. So again, I don't rest on our laurels here. We've got to keep thinking about this. I think eventually there's going to have to be really holistic discussions all the way from the Dakotas down on water releases, self-scouring of the river, maintaining it as a navigable waterway, but also really thinking about what areas need to have backflows and green overflow areas. And that goes into, a long running dream of mine is looking at Harlem and looking at the areas around the downtown airport and really thinking about that. But to me, that entire north area has to stay. We've really actually need to probably not develop it in a way that requires levees and further hemming in of the river. We need to think of the North Shore through Kansas City as being much like Parkville, being activated space that can ebb and flow literally with the rise of the river. And that'll help us in the developed areas, which the West Bottoms and KCK those have to stay protected, and the East Bottoms has to stay protected. There's too many billions of dollars of investment down there to not do that.
Thank you. Last question, and then I'll turn it back over to Liz to close this out this evening. Looking back, and this is probably even looking back further than your time at Port KC, but do you think there was anything that was like a really significant turning point that's got the momentum started to start seeing the development and the results that are happening now today?
Yeah, I think there were multiple factors. I mean, again, full credit to many people for decades before. I would boil it down to several factors. One of them is honestly just embarrassment. I think that, keep in mind, this area in more modern times was a city tow lot. There were abandoned cars on our riverfront that were visible. And as the river market, started coming back, and Mayor Cleaver and obviously Berkley, even before, but really, I think a lot of public officials and Mid-America Regional Council and others looked at it and said, wow, that is embarrassing. Second was potential, that people started looking at things such as, later the Sasaki plan and other plans of, well, what makes downtown successful? Well, what makes them successful is holistic neighborhood development and experiences. And we've done a lot of things wrong, really, since the 1950s in how we have developed our downtown. But I think looking at that, and then the third one, it's a really easy one. It was the passage of riverboat gambling, and the fact that this project that's now Bali was the first one, and it located here. This should have been, and I think will be again, the most desirable spot for a riverboat, quote unquote. I use that term all tongue in cheek. But as that development came in, and Kansas City, Missouri was looking at, well, how do we get that amenity and our share of the pie, so to speak, that really brought home, wow, what have we done to our riverfront, and how do we develop it in a way that works? And that was a real and meaningful step. And I think a lot of people, you can rightfully criticize. I've been critical of, dropping casinos on the river in the way that we did. But honestly, that level of investment and that level of recurring investment and leasehold for decades of lease payments, of the casino paying lease payments to port and to the city, is a pretty big reinvestment catalyst and reinvestment incentive to continue the growth and reclaiming our riverfront.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jon. This has been a delight. I know that I've gotten a lot out of it, and I suspect other folks have too. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your support as our members, our friends, our advocates, and our allies. My light turned off. I'm gonna wave my arm. That's not gonna work. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. We appreciate your support, and I know that Port KC does as well. Keep in touch. We will have more of these virtual events as we go along. Stay tuned. I'll send out that email tomorrow that will have the link to this event, as well as some follow-up information from us and from Port KC. Thank you, and have a good night.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.